Hi, diddly-ho. Neighborino, welcome in. Ladies and gentlemen, anyone in between, and everyone who knows better. It is James Allen Dempsey, your cultural coroner, feasting on the carcass of Americana and issuing the epitaph of the underground music universe that many of you suckers living in yesterday still think is a thing. Got a viewer request here, Phil, extending off of a previous query. Now, as near as we could transliterate this from the magic marker scrawled paper towel, Dear Dempsey, PLZ discuss Wigger Slam. Signed, name redacted, for legal purposes. P.S. Infectious jelking owns you, asshole. Thank you, loyal viewer. I have some questions here. Phil, can I say Wigger? We're gonna discuss the phenomenon of Wigga Slam here today, and let's dive right in, shall we? So, in a previous video, there's not too many as of yet, so go ahead and check it out. We discussed a little outfit from Oklahoma that goes by the name of Peeling Flesh and plays the Wigga Slam. And I did not go too in-depth into it because I rather feel that the name Wigga Slam is as self-evident as it gets for this kind of thing. Now, what does it sound like? Well, it's Wigger Slam. Per the ever-reliable Metal Archives, some related artists in this genre include Body Box, Bolt Cutter, they're not done alphabetically here, Bashed In, Arsony, Vampire Cunt, No Zodiac, Field Dressed Crime Slug, Epidarticectomy, Guttural Damage, Baited Massive Flesh, which shouldn't that be a braided mass of flesh? Clown Vomit, Mug Dump, and that sounds like something my kids would understand, honestly. A band called 10 to the Chest, which, okay, so who here wouldn't want to put 10 to the chest? I'm just saying. And, moving right along. So Peeling Flesh. Yeah, moving right along. Peeling Flesh from Oklahoma and the Wigger Slam. You know, this I followed up with our loyal viewer. This guy was not actually aware of infectious jelking, which I thought was interesting. Sort of figured that was the genesis of this entire phenomenon, so far as I was aware. Highest rated band in this category is a band called Snuffed on Sight. Now you're asking yourself, you went ahead and listened to Snuffed on Sight to get an idea of what you're talking about, right? And you are grievously incorrect. I'll assume it's the most Wigger of the Wigger Slams. Oh, of the Wigga Slam. Because got a good 15 points on the next competitor here, Body Box. Now, when I discussed Peeling Flesh, I also discussed a band called Oh Vador. And we touched on the cover art of this album. The artist, a chap named Oscar Wergeland from a tiny nation called Norway, and this, I think, is a good jumping off point to outline some of the axioms by which this channel will function, because let us not mince words here. If I was just going to talk about the crap that people put out these days as an excuse for heavy metal albums, that'd be redundant work. There's plenty enough people doing that, so I'm going to try to have something interesting to say, and if you bear with us for long enough, maybe one of these years I'll get around to it. Now, Oscar Wergeland practiced in a style called naturalism / realism, capital N / capital R, to distinguish from naturalism or realism, which are techniques that occur in painting at pretty much any period. Capital N, capital R, naturalism, realism, generally is meant to specify a particular time and place in painting history. Time, more than place, granted. It was largely a reaction to the Romantic movement of a couple decades previous, and helped to presage the Impressionist movement. Now, the Romantic movement is something that statistically you are probably not interested enough in. Twin literary foundations of this movement are Frankenstein and Dracula, and it was the era of the penny dreadfuls. The general aesthetic of the Romance era is what people are thinking of when they say the word goth, whether or not they know it. And it was a death-fixated era. In terms of painting, romanticism led into realism by way of reaction, leading to Impressionism by some connection or another. This is not a video and art criticism, so we're not going too in-depth into that, which is good because Impressionism leads pretty directly into Surrealism, and how you get from Monet to Dali or Picasso is an interesting and probably very in-depth story, but for our purposes we can point out that in the middle of this process came the Dada movement and World War I. And this whole process is, of course, spanning an entire century, which is divided pretty neatly by the harnessing of the electricity and culminating in World War I and the rise of fascism, which brings us to Futurism, another interesting art movement. But we'll get to that another day. Now, 10 minutes into this, I know what you're asking yourself. What does all this have to do with Wigga Slam? Bear with me, we're coming to that. So, I mentioned in a previous video that the most significant development of the last 2 centuries is and will remain, almost certainly, for another couple of decades, the electric telegraph, because previous to this, the mere notion of transmitting information remotely across great distance was inconceivable. So the world after the electric telegraph just looks a lot different than the world before it, because the amount of things that are opened up by the telegraph aren't immediately apparent to the world as soon as the telegraph goes wild. There's a cat named Marshall McLuhan who had a dictum: the medium is the message. And what he meant by this is that every technology brings a new means of thinking, it opens up new possibilities to think about the world, and that opens up itself new ways to interact with the world, new technologies, but most fundamentally just new ways to think about the world. Now, tying this back to Wigga Slam, there is the notion of ideas and how ideas function. And there is a fundamental misconception about ideas. This is one of the axioms of this channel. Ideas are bigger than people, and people do not have ideas. People channel ideas. There is no animating idea in politics, in culture, in society today, not even the ones that you think are dangerous ideas, fascism or communism or what have you, that is not going to continue to animate politics, culture, and society long after you and I and everyone else is dead. Ideas do not die. The only way to kill an idea, which can only even be accomplished temporarily, is to lose the technology by which a idea is facilitated. The history of the Dark Ages, in fact, is when they lost a lot of the technology that facilitated the Roman Empire, such as Roman cement. Now, what does that have to do with Wigga Slam? Because did someone have this idea? Or is this just an idea that is out there for people to jump on? That question is especially dubious in the age of the internet, when ideas aren't transferred as quickly as the older kid down the block can tell you about this fantastic record by this band called Autopsy. Or, as the case may be, check out the cover from this album by this band Devourment. You can do a quick Google search for Alexa, show me naked, decapitated bodies of obese people. And you're halfway there. All you need is to be a wigger. Because artistic movements are functions of their time and place. You couldn't really have the Surrealist movement a century previous. The closest they really had was the Romantic movement, which, we'll come back to that in a second. You could scarce do Wigga Slam before you'd had a dying fetus to open the door to the slam in general. Just imagine going from a deicide to a snuffed on sight. Granted, it's a little easier to go from a repulsion to a snuffed on sight, but how many generations are we removed from here? You have to be probably even geekier than the kids in the body box to be aware of as much as a repulsion and a snuffed on sight. You might even be such a dork as to be making YouTube videos about this shit. As I said, there's enough of them. They can't hear you, Phil. Don't even. All right. Now, going back to the Romantic movement, It is an axiom of this channel that taboos say as much about a society as anything else. Oftentimes, taboos are more useful for telling you about a society. The Victorians are famously prudish about the 10 to the chest, but Victorians were not so shy as our current era about the topic of death. They were very comfortable with the whole ash to ash and dust to dust aspect of life, and it has been observed by such sage philosophers as James Dempsey that the taboos have essentially shifted 180 degrees somewhere along the way here. Their sex is our death. And death remains somewhat of a taboo in our culture. So, 40 years removed from the origins, death metal still has a whiff of the taboo for those wiggers interested in applying their artistic endeavors to some template or another. But their conception of death metal is going to be a bit different than ours. Those of us 20, 30, 40 years into that game, because in 1985 and in 1995 even, there was a lot less to be heard in that vein, and it was a lot more something you had to look for. Consequently, it was a lot less the background. There was also less access because you had to get it through other people much more than you could just have it brought to you in your living room or on your pocket device. So, again, artistic movements are a function of time and place. They are facilitated by their technology, and as we see from the jump from water lilies to whatever the cow thing is called, artistic movements can very drastically alter in very short order as one extra party comes in with a very disparate influence and adds something new to the mix. Now, I did touch on penny dreadfuls. I feel like we should all be dimly aware, at least, of penny dreadfuls. They were a presage to comic books, the Pulp Fiction of the Romantic era, a basis for the Tales from the Crypt series. Low-class kind of stuff, much like the comics of the day, but to my knowledge, unlike the comics in their golden age, they were a bit less squelched upon. So, if we have this broad cultural perception that the 1950s was this great golden age, part of that stems from the fact that the people presently dominating thought and culture in our society grew up in the 1950s and were too young to know better, but also that this was the beginning of a taboo shift, so that while death was becoming taboo, sex was on its way out as a taboo. You had a generation that came back from a couple of world wars and was probably looking to put death on the shelf for a minute, having seen it on an industrial scale, and they were maybe wanting to get a few to the chest themselves with some of their hula hoops and their dancing cheek to cheek. Now, Wigga Slam. Wigga Slam. I feel like we've seen how we can jump pretty broadly from a Altars of Madness to a snuffed on sight. Question really is, how did we get here? No, that's not the question at all. It's pretty short steps, actually. You just go right from your devourment into your... It's been 20 years now, and that's something that kids have now grown up with and are making memes about. And who's making the memes? This is another iteration of the party thrash. Because go ahead and drop it in the comments below if I'm wrong on this one. And you yourself are a personal metal archives, but I don't remember the 1980s thrash album Cowabunga Pizza Time. The entire Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles aesthetic that was transposed onto thrash in the era of the aforementioned bonginator in the wave of municipal waste. That was, so far as I'm aware, a meme genre pioneered by people that have a different idea and a different level of reverence for 1980s thrash than... Alright, you know what? I was there for that one because I don't give a shit about 1980s thrash. I'm in for the death metal. And in terms of the Wigga Slam, I'm here for that too. Now, I do have some questions. Where precisely do we go to put our 10 to the chest? And do I have anything else to say about Wigga Slam? Answer? No. So, come on back tomorrow and we will discuss some other stupid bullshit. Thank you for watching, and get a fucking job.